This is Unrendered. Welcome back. My name is Chester Connell, and if you're just joining us, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of our fair and blessed Isle, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, is our guest. Dr. Gonsalves, welcome once again to Unrendered.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. You have much to talk about. Let's get straight to the issues. You have just come back from Venezuela. Barbados was involved as well. What is happening in Venezuela at the moment? You went there to memorialize your fallen comrade 1 year after, Hugo
Yes.
Chavez. Tell us what happened from your point of view.
Well, the centerpiece of the memorial for the first anniversary of the death of the former president, Hugo Chavez Frias, was a civic military parade. It was magnificent, extremely well attended by the people of Venezuela. It's a huge place, rows and rows of stands, they were all jam-packed. And then the representatives of people.
Was CARICOM there?
Well, CARICOM was not there as CARICOM, but I was there as Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and of course I'm the current chairman of CARICOM. Roosevelt Skerritt, Prime Minister of Dominica, was there. Portia Simpson Miller, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, was there. Representatives of other governments from the region, ambassadors, foreign ministers, and the like, and people from, representatives from governments from further afield.
Now, while that is going on, Prime Minister, of course, the situation in Venezuela is not one that is one that we would like to have.
Yes.
There are terrible things happening, as we know. The economy is being challenged. Mr. Maduro himself is under severe stress. Are you offering any advice to Mr. Maduro?
No, I'm not. I'm not offering any advice to him. I mean, while I was in Venezuela, I spoke to several leading members of government, and I also had a brief chat with President Maduro. Look, what do we have in Venezuela? We have a country which is, on the basis of the results of the presidential elections, divided down the middle. That's just less than a year ago. But just less than a few months ago, in December, we had the local government elections where the ruling party won overwhelmingly the local government elections. All the elections been assessed to be free and fair. And so at the national level, the people have elected the president. The government has a majority in the parliament, and also they are in democratic control of the bulk of the local government authorities, the governorships and mayorships and the like. But Venezuela is a democratic country, and people have their individual rights and freedoms to protest, and they can protest, but they can't have acts of violence. They may be even permitted to block the roads, even though that's an act of civil disobedience. But when it is accompanied by violence, there is a problem. No, in many countries all over the world, if you have a democratic government which is elected, Margaret Thatcher used to be elected with less than 50% of the vote all the time. In fact, she never scored 50% of the vote. But yet, when people were on the streets protesting her in one way or the other, including in some occasions blocking the road, sometimes people would be arrested. Sometimes they're not arrested. But if they commit act of violence, they will be challenged. Now, you asked me. It seems as though the situation has stabilized from what I could see. There's still obviously democratic protests, but we mustn't forget this. The government is in power because it won elections. the workers in PDVSA, which is the company which provides the resources, fully supported by the government, and they come out and they protest. They show solidarity, with the government. The army is united behind the government. What you have in Venezuela is that, and a lot of people don't realize it, the bulk of the media by far is privately owned, and huge sections of it are opposed to the government. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of the democratic activity. The issue is, of course, is when you have foreign interference, trying to stoke the fires underneath.
That may be so, Prime Minister. However, there are some issues. Venezuela has an issue with China, where a lot of they've taken a large loan from China. They're having difficulty paying it back. PDVSA is under strain because that, as you say, is their cash cow, so to speak. Venezuela has just broken ties with Panama. They've just expelled the Panamanian ambassador. Now,
yes.
That says to me, okay, that signals that's a no-no. Here we're trying to build regionalism. We're trying to build forces within the region. We speak of ALBA, and this is healthy, but yet there seems to be a breakdown.
Well, I think what has happened is this. Though we have ALBA, but what the more important body in terms of all the countries of the hemisphere, save and except Canada and the United States, is CELAC, the Community of States of Latin America and the Caribbean. The summit was held recently in Havana in January. The Panamanian government was present, was represented. And we are seeking to build a unity across Latin America and the Caribbean through CELAC. There would be from time to time dissonance, and the authorities in Venezuela feel that the extent of the dissonance is such that they consider breaking relations to be the appropriate way to show their opposition to what they consider Panama is doing. They've said that Panama is meddling in their affairs, that Panama is being used by other forces to generate opposition in certain fora internationally, that they've tried to talk to the Panamanians, they wouldn't listen, and therefore they've taken this step. Now, another government may not have taken the step, despite all of that, but they have taken that decision. I don't know. That doesn't spell good news for us. No, well, the point is this. They have placed a great deal of premium on what they consider that states should not interfere in the internal affairs of Venezuela. And they've said, I've heard the president on this, they value their sovereignty very highly. And they were thinking that Panama had crossed the boundaries. Now, I'm not in possession of all
Neither am I.
The facts as to why Panama has crossed the boundaries. All I could say is what I've heard them articulate.
What is our relationship now and the situation with Petrocaribe? There are critics and observers, pundits who are saying is it 9 countries that are in the CARICOM that are connected to Petrocaribe, that we need to be consolidating, we need to be looking at a plan B. Your take on that?
Well, let me say this.
Is Petrocaribe under threat?
Not from my vantage point. But before I raise that question whether it's under threat or not, first of all, I must say that Petrocaribe is good for St. Vincent and the Grenadines and good for the members in Petrocaribe.
Why do you say that?
Well, we get fuel slightly cheaper because of the transportation savings. But where you make the savings is on the financial arrangements, the purchase arrangements. 50%, sometimes depending on the price of the oil, it might be 40% of what the cost of the oil you get on a long-term credit of 20 years at 1% interest. No,
But isn't that just deferring the inevitable, that we're going to have to pay this?
no, but the point is this. Just that anybody who lends me money at 1% for 20 years, I'd love to have it, because essentially it's a grant.
You're not going to say no.
Essentially it's a grant. Because by the time you're paying that back in 20 years' time, it would not be the value at the time when you got it. So it's a long term, and it's a very low rate of interest. Now, why that is important for us, and particularly in the period where we had all these economic challenges coming to us from overseas because of the problem with our bananas, with the market regime and the market conditions externally, the issue of the meltdown internationally of the global economy, the question of the insurance company difficulties with CLICO and BICO, and of course the number of storms, hurricanes that we have had, weather events, put a lot of strain on us. And if you can get from Petrocaribe or anybody monies which are so cheap, what it does, it avoids me having to go to the market to borrow commercially, to do many things which I have to do, particularly developmental work that I have to do. Look, the World Bank is giving some loans now after the storm, which are much better terms than that Petrocaribe loan.
Is that right?
Yes. So we are getting a substantial amount of money from them.
If Petrocaribe was to come to an end tomorrow?
You know, I hear that argument, and this is why I say I want to talk about the benefits first. Small countries like St. Vincent and the Grenadines have always sought to get favorable options in order to come to terms with the challenges extant in their own internal condition, and also the threats and challenges from outside. What are these challenges from inside? The small economy, limited resources, basically vulnerable, fragile economy. Outside, I listed some of those. The impact from the collapse of the world economy, at least the meltdown, and of course the threats of nature. We always have to seek to find spaces. We had a space lasted a very long time with preferences for bananas. We took advantage of that. Before that, there was a space with granting aid. We have some spaces with other things, and you take advantage of those spaces. And we have always made adjustments. If those spaces become narrow or closed off, if a space becomes narrow or closed off, sometime down the road, it doesn't mean that when the space exists, that you shouldn't take advantage of it.
So your vision is that we will find a space, and that is what you do. You look for spaces.
Absolutely.
Economic spaces. We've come to the end of this section already. I was hoping to cover more ground, but we'll get onto the second segment. This is Unrendered. Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, is our guest. We'll be right back with the agenda for CARICOM. We've got a number of issues to talk about: human resource development, the economic situation, reform process in CARICOM, draft protocols for adoption or consideration, and of course LIAT, and the list goes on. We'll be right back in a moment.